Hey, Dolby, what are you doing? We've got a podcast to start in like 5 minutes.
I'm praying to Stephen Fry, the voice of Brian Blessed. Oh, great Stephen Fry, bless us with a bountiful podcast, filled with interesting topics and many listeners.
Okay, awesome. Now let's go. Let's get this done.
Let us go.
Okay, stop praying now. We're done. Let's go. Hey there, guys, girls. I'm Miscellaneous House, Briken, or David here, and this is the second episode of the Two Guys, Two Guests podcast. With me, as always, is my magnificent steed, Dolby 2612.
Hello.
And our one guest today is the very special Rami from Vlambeer.
Hey there.
Hello, Rami.
So, Rami, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Rami. I'm half of a Dutch independent studio known as Vlambeer, and Vlambeer is probably in turn best known for Super Crate Box, which is our arcade game. It's free, so if people want something to do during the podcast, they can download it right away at supercratebox.com. We're also working on Luftrausers. We made a game about fishing with shotguns called Radical Fishing. We did a turn-based RPG about the Serious Sam IP. We made a hip-hop-based gangster rap first-person shooter about killing a god of guns in a hotel on Venus, which is the only building on Venus. Basically,
awesome.
We make a lot of games. We try to do as much as we can. And we're basically just two guys that really think that there is a lot left to explore in sort of the arcadey side of gaming.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
Cool. Well, I'm going to put links to all of the... I'll put a link to your website on the video, and I'll put links to all the games websites in the description.
Sure.
So,
many of them are free or really cheap. So if people want something to do during the podcast, like they can give it a go.
yeah, I was actually playing Super Crate Box just before, like, we invited you into the call, and it's very difficult.
Yeah,
It's
no,
awesome. It's awesome.
That's
it's tough.
actually one of the things that we mean with arcade games. Our games are known for being quite merciless,
That they are.
but that's because, to us, games are something that you can get better at, right? They're the system that you're presenting your players with, this sort of world with rules, and players have to navigate those rules. And if they do well, they thrive within the system and they get high scores. And if they don't do well, they lose.
Exactly.
And for us, that is sort of a basic a fundamental of the games we make is we give the player as much responsibility as possible.
Awesome.
And we do that by having rules that have as much responsibility as possible. So unlike, say, any AAA first-person shooter where they're basically holding your hand for most of the game, and having checkpoints that make sure that if you die, you don't feel like you've lost too much progress. And they have interactive tutorials that they walk you through all sorts of stuff, and you're basically this super soldier that has to go through some sort of crash course and then immediately turns into the most prestigious task force around the world. That sort of stuff we like playing that, but we don't really like making that.
Yeah, I can understand.
We like making games about the player.
Yeah, because a lot of games seem to be... Lately, games seem to be trying to sort of remove the challenge instead of giving you a bit more of it. And it's great to see a game studio that's actually, changing that. It's sort of turning it on its head. It's really refreshing anyway.
It's actually interesting because at the same day that when we were done with Super Crate Box, which is 2 years old by now, for the PC, when we were done with that, we planned to release it on October 2010, because in European date, that will be 2010, right?
Yeah.
America's never got that one. But 2010, and then it turned out that there was another game launching that has the same philosophy a bit as ours on 2010, and that was Super Meat Boy, which coincidentally also had like 9 characters in common with our name. So that was an issue. So we delayed it by 2 days. But it really shows that there's this sort of movement, or at least there has been this movement in the indie scene of making games that are really systematic, right? That are really about the core system, and that try to give the player as much responsibility without taking that responsibility away in any way. It's the same thing why we don't like in Call of Duty, why we don't really like the scenes where they, or actually any first-person shooter, where they try to justify your violence, where they just go like, you're a super soldier killing hundreds of people, but the bad guys did, and then they show this horrible thing that the bad guys did, and then you can shoot them again because they're bad guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To us, like they launch a nuke or something. To us, a game like Hotline Miami, I don't know if you guys have played that, but
Yeah.
Hotline Miami is an indie game. And basically, it just gives you a phone call every mission saying, kill these people at this place because we're telling you they are bad. Then as the game progresses, you know, you start to sort of doubt the truthfulness of those phone calls. And it's not because the story tells you like, oh, this is sketchy, this is wrong. It's just like they allow you to figure out for yourself whether it's wrong. They allow you to sort of establish your own story around events in the game. And that is cool. I mean, that's something we really like. We like players if we ever were to make a game with a story, it would be a game that's not per se a game that with a story that we tell people. It's a game that people will tell stories about.
But like the way the Dark Souls tells its story?
Exactly. The way because nobody ever talks about, in Dark Souls or Dwarf Fortress or Spelunky, nobody's ever talking about the story of the game, right? You just don't do that because the story of the game isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
What is interesting is how you can tell that you were walking over a bridge and you were down to you got pretty screwed over before that, and then there was this one battle, and if you managed to slay the dragon or something, you could continue on in the game, right?
Yeah.
And then you did it with barely anything on you. You managed to kill the dragon, and then continue on. And those are stories. Those are the things we love. Because they're not stories that we are telling you. They're stories that you are telling us on Twitter, on Facebook, and people are telling each other. And that's super exciting. That's why Minecraft is so amazing, because it allows people to tell stories.
Yeah, it's like make it your own instead of have it.
Yeah, and we're not against having stories. I mean, I just finished Dishonored, and I just finished Far Cry 3, and I think Dishonored is one of the best made games in a long, long time. And Far Cry 3 was pretty fun as well, and it has really good antagonists, and I like those games. I like playing through stories. I actually really enjoyed Call of Duty Black Ops 2, even for everything I say about it. I mean, I really appreciate how much work goes into a Call of Duty game. It's just that is one side of gaming, right?
Yeah.
It's the one end. It's the Hollywood roller coaster ride. And then you've got the games that are somewhere in between, which is like a Dishonored, which is definitely a roller coaster ride, but it's a roller coaster ride that
you get to make your own choices in.
That sort of allows you the freedom of owning the story. And then you've got like the more extreme version of that, which is The Walking Dead or Journey, which have really minimalist stories, but people keep telling stories about it all the time. And then you've got the indie scene where like everybody's just experimenting like crazy with all sorts of interesting ways to tell stories in video games.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. It's a lot more eloquent than I could have anyway.
Yeah, it's because we've got this beautiful medium, right? Video games.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful medium. And why is it a beautiful medium? And this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is why, how I got into video games, into making video games, is when I was 6, we got this computer, right? It was one of those ancient computers that had like a floppy drive with MS-DOS, because it didn't have a hard drive, so you had to load MS-DOS from the floppy drive, and then it would load MS-DOS into the computer, and then you'd have to put in another floppy drive with the program you wanted to use.
Yeah.
And the one thing I did on that computer was I played a game called Gorillas. And it was this really, really simple 2D game where you had to enter an angle and a velocity, and then your gorilla would throw an explosive banana at another gorilla. And that was it. But the funny thing is, to play that game, I had to open a file of code and then run that code. And 6-year-old me was curious and started changing stuff in the code, which then ended up changing the game. And that fascinated me. It's like, oh man, if I change stuff in this text that I don't understand at all, like it happens inside this game. Like if I put my name here, I will see my name in the game. If I change this number here, the background color will be different. And from that point on, I've always been fascinated with the way systems work and the way you can influence them. And basically that is what a video game is. But the interesting thing that gives players is, so if you read a book, right? What book did you guys read?
Last book I read was Game of Thrones Feast for Crows.
So tell me something about one character.
Jon Snow, Soldier on the Wall.
Good. So, movies. So what is a movie you guys watch?
Avengers.
Yeah.
Tell me something about somewhere in there.
Thor is main character. He's from Norse religion.
Video games. Tell me a video game you played.
Assassin's Creed 3.
Okay, tell me something you did in that game.
Killed people.
Walked up and assassinated 5 guys in a line.
So that's the interesting part right there, because you didn't say Connor killed 6 people in a row. You said I killed 6 people in a row. Yeah. For me, that is the interesting part about video games. You identify with the things that happen in the game. And that is something no book or movie or anything could ever do, because you're not reading your own actions. It's the fact that your own actions influence what is happening that allow you to really take place in this universe that game developers can craft for you. And that is really what is most interesting to me. Like, what can we do with that eye? And I think we're in a really exciting time where games like Journey and The Walking Dead and Hotline Miami are really pushing that and changing games from being basically movies that are interactive to something that is beyond movies. I'm really excited to see where that takes us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It's a very exciting thing to see where game technology is going to take us and the way that we develop our stories.
Yeah, I mean, look at The Walking Dead. How did you guys play The Walking Dead?
Yeah, I've played some of The Walking Dead. I've not finished it yet. Don't spoil things.
One of the episodes.
So I finished it just a few weeks ago. I will not be ashamed to admit that I had to cry at certain points in the story, because it's just such a powerful emotional experience. And the only reason it is such a powerful emotional experience is because I felt really responsible about some of the events that happened in my storyline.
Yeah, the choices you made affected what happened and what characters did.
Exactly, and sure thing. If I talk to other people, they basically had a similar story, and some characters died and some characters didn't. But still, that sense of responsibility is something that only a video game can give, and something like The Walking Dead is for the first time in a long time is showing us how powerful responsibility can be as an emotional sort of tool to use in telling a story. in having a video game. And basically, and that's where it kind of loops back to Vlambeer. Basically, that is what we do, right? We try to push to the extremes of what responsibility is for the player. We're not going to hold hands. We're not going to give you any second tries. Here you go, have the game, figure it out, and do your best, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not going to hold hands. We're not that kind of people. And sure, we have made some games that hold hands a bit more, but in the end, they always ramp up to this difficulty where the only way you can improve your score is by improving yourself.
Yeah, it's a lot more throw you straight into the deep end than most games are nowadays.
Yeah, and I mean, in the end, nobody ever tells a story about Super Crate Box where they go, so this guy was jumping around a construction yard and he was shooting at things, and everybody goes like, I scored 200 crates and I died because a big green enemy spawned, and then I jumped over it, and then the skull was floating right there, and I tried to shoot it with the disc gun, and then the disc gun reflected in my face.
Yeah, that disc gun's annoying.
Yes, this gun is Satan.
The disc gun is actually the most fun thing we put in the game. You know why we originally put that there?
Yeah, why?
Because people, if they grabbed a crate, they would just instantly shoot it, always.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pretty good strategy, because whatever you got, like, shooting was always the best option.
Yeah.
So we needed something where shooting wouldn't always be the best option.
Yeah, if you do that with this gun, you're dead.
Yep. We've seen a lot of videos on the internet of people getting really, really angry at us for having like a perfect run and then grabbing a crate, shooting it, and having a disc gun deflect into them like quarter of a second later.
Yeah, like the first time I played Super Crate Box was at Eurogamer, and I was like, when I got the disc gun, I was like, what the hell is this doing? And I ended up killing myself. It was so annoying.
The fun part is we actually apologize for the disc gun when you unlock it, right?
Yeah.
I noticed that.
We actually say like, we hereby sincerely apologize, and people always go like, huh? Why would you apologize? And then they die, and then they go like, oh.
Why are you apologizing for giving me this gun? And then
Yeah, no, we are apologizing. We're sorry. We're sorry that we just made your life a whole lot harder.
Yeah, I got my stepdad to play this game for a bit. He unlocked the disc gun at one point, and then when he first fired it, it just caused him to stop playing. He was like, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so, like, stories about the disc gun are my favorite thing about Super Crate Box. Just watching somebody streaming Super Crate Box for the first time ever and not knowing what the disc gun is. You see all these little sort of responses to the disc gun where they shoot it and they go like, that's just a 1 pixel line. What is it? And they stop moving. So there's basically they stand still in this one spot. That is the only spot that you are certain to die in, which is the place where you shot the disc gun.
Yeah.
And they just stand there going like, what? And then the bullet comes back, the disc comes back, and they're like, huh? And then you see, like, just before it hits them, they panic and they jump or they don't jump. But then usually they screw up and they just go like, no, screw these guys. Whoever put that in there, they need to get fired.
Nah, I like.
But we can't do that.
Games do things like that. It's like you can die because of your own stupidity instead of because of the way the game is.
Yeah, exactly. Super Crate Box. So the thing with responsibility is you can only give players responsibility if you don't take it away. You can't like say, and this is one of those things that we also don't like about a lot of AAA games, is, in AAA games where you get hit by a grenade and you take cover and then you wait a bit and then you go on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You've fully healed.
Yeah.
So why is it that when the protagonist gets stabbed by the bad guy right at the end, they always have to limp for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
I always wondered that.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense, right? I know they're using it to amplify a feeling, but if you have a super soldier that can recover from a rocket launcher to the face followed by a grenade, like, why the hell is he limping when he gets stabbed? Is he like really weak against knives?
Yeah.
Is he sort of invulnerable against explosions, but do knives hurt him a lot?
It's like, knives, my only weakness.
It's like my one weakness. I've gotten all this far, but not this time.
Yeah.
Whoa. We said no knives. Calm down, guys. But, yeah.
That's one of the things that annoys me a lot. It's like with video games, you can do all these things, and then if the same thing happens in the story, you're just completely screwed.
Yeah. So there's actually a term for that called ludonarrative dissonance. It's basically when the game allows you to do stuff that your character can't do in the story, or the other way around. When there is sort of disruption between what you're playing and the story. And one of the funnier examples always is Nathan Drake in Uncharted, right? He's like this guy that shoots 500, 600 people in a row, and then he feels like really bad about killing one specific bad guy, like somewhere further in the story. And it's like, wait, what? You just killed you're basically a walking army, and now you go like, oh shit, I'm so sorry I killed this one guy.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
It's weird, but we accept it because that's the way games have evolved so far. But I'm really interested to see where games will go from now, and whether we can challenge that sort of weirdness in games. Because I understand why the limping scene is there, but is there a way to do it better? Is there a better way to do it? Can we, as video game developers, can we push beyond that sort of accepted tool of making people feel differently? And then, you look at something like Journey. If you've played Journey, there's like this scene where you're walking up a mountain and your character is just sort of exhausted, and your character won't really move anymore because there's storm and there's like wind and gusts, and it's dark, and your character sort of stops moving and then falls over. And it's like, that's a really powerful moment because it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Your character has been walking for 3 hours, going through the heights of the desert, the heat of the desert, to the depths of caves, and then onto a mountain with basically a blizzard. And it makes sense that your character is exhausted. It doesn't make sense for Rambo to get shot 1,200 times and then get stabbed and go like, oh, I got stabbed. Oh,
yeah,
my life.
Yeah. Journey is one of them games that are really powerful by doing very little.
Yeah.
It's like the entire thing's just walking about, and it does it amazingly. It makes you feel for the character.
Yeah, but that is exactly what we're doing at Vlambeer. It's like minimalist games to allow as much responsibility to the player, right?
Yeah.
So the more we let you do, and the less we involve ourselves in it, the more responsible you will feel for your game. Super crate box is basically 3 rules, right? It's like, grab a crate for a random weapon and a point. Touch an enemy and you die. If an enemy reaches the bottom, they turn red and angry, and they come back from the top twice as fast. That's Super Crate Box.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
And then, when we on the design for that took him 2 days. He had a prototype in like 2 hours, and then in 2 days we had basically Super Crate Box. And it was the same game, but it wasn't a fun game. And it wasn't a fun game because games aren't fun just by their systems. They're fun when everything feels right. You would almost call it a burden, but it's with video games, everything has to work. If there is one thing that doesn't feel the way you want it to feel, it's gonna take players out of that ride that you want them to be in, right? Mm-hmm. They will stop believing in your world. And you need them to believe in your world, because otherwise they won't care about your world. So our trick to do that is basically throwing up shit at our players that they don't have time to think, which works really well. We just have screen shake and explosions, and make sure people are busy, like making all these tiny choices all the time. And then failing at some point to do the right thing, and then having to start over. that's fun for us. That's really fun for us. And it's not the only type of game we do, right? We're maybe sort of known for doing arcadey games, but we do all sorts of stuff. It's just that is, for me at least, it's one of the most interesting parts, and I think JW would agree with me there. JW is the other Vlambeer, by the way.
Yeah.
He would agree with me that there is just so much left to explore in the arcade space, in the action space, maybe even. That we just haven't, because we all agreed that an action game is a game with a big guy with a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the basic premise.
Yeah.
See, the great thing about the sort of games you make that are, like, they are incredibly difficult. It's one of the best things about them. But the great things, one of the better, in my opinion, things about them is that a lot of them are very simplistic. Like, and not simplistic in the you can do this easily sense, more simplistic in the sense that you can do it 100 times and fail 100 times and not feel like it's your fault.
Yeah. So.
Not feel like it's the game's fault.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose that is sort of the thing, right? Our games are, if somebody, and this is actually something that happened to us, and that was a pretty pretty sad part of being Vlambeer. Our games are games that are easy to make, right? Like the things we do, they take a lot of work to come up with and to get them right and to get them to feel right. I mean, Super Crate Box, like I said, we designed that in 2 days, but then we spent like 6 months trying to make every weapon feel as good as it can. If you shoot the shotgun, there's like a 2-pixel recoil, and there's a reload sound, and then the shell ejects from your gun, and then basically that when the reload sound ends, that is exactly when you can shoot again.
Yeah.
And it took us a long time to figure out how to make a shotgun feel as good as possible within 10 by 10 pixels, with one sound available. And how can we get players into this groove of shooting the shotgun? Because that's important to us. We want the shotgun to feel great. And that sort of stuff takes us a long time. And coming up with the original idea of Super Crate Box took even longer. That JW has been toying around with making a platform shooter for 2 years. And Super Crate Box is the final result of that. So it's basically 2 years of trying to come up with an interesting game, and then Super Crate Box is the final result of that, right?
Yeah, it's the process behind it is just it's long, but you feel proud at the end of it because it's the way you wanted it to feel like.
Exactly. But if somebody wants to make Super Crate Box and they have Super Crate Box, like any somewhat proficient game developer could basically make Super Crate Box right as we did it in like a few weeks.
Like what happened with your Radical Fishing being cloned. Yeah.
And so that's the sad part about Vlambeer. Our games are easy to replicate, and sometimes people use that to copy our ideas and sell them, basically. So we made this game about fishing with shotguns called Radical Fishing, and we were working on making that for iOS, right? So we got together this amazing team of people. The developer from America named Zach Gage. He's a really cool guy. He made this game called Lose Lose, which is basically Space Invaders, but when you kill an enemy, it deletes a file from your computer.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the ultimate troll game.
It's perfect. It warns you. It actually really warns you that if you start it, you will delete files from your computer. But that was basically just Zach telling you that, if I did this with your photo album, just a real life photo album, and I'd say every time you kill an enemy, I burn a photo, you'd go like, no, I'm not going to play this.
Yeah.
But when you do it on your computer, well, there are just as many unique photos that there is no substitute for. It'll just go like, well, should I? Shouldn't I? Should I? Shouldn't I? And that's a really cool way of explaining that sort of the worth of digital files is less to people than the worth of
actual files, the physical format.
It's an interesting way to use video games to tell something, because you can make people do or feel something that they normally wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
It's the I thing again, where I play a video game. It's not he plays video, it's I play a video game.
Yeah.
And then we got an artist, Greg Walwyn, who is he's someone we've always sort of looked up to, because he can use simple shapes with so much effect. Like he has a really stark, strong color use of colors and shapes. And we thought, like, for ridiculous fishing, that would be perfect. An iOS game with, stark, bright, beautiful, beautiful art style. And the guy who did the music for Super Crate Box, Eirik Surke, who also did Spelunky for Xbox Live Arcade, by the way. We got him aboard to do the music, and we basically had this amazing team of people working on the game for a few months. And then suddenly, like, one day, we're working on the game, and our Twitter just explodes, right? We check our Twitter a lot, because it's really fun to be talking to our fans and just seeing what's up. And Twitter just it goes crazy. There's like hundreds of tweets, and we're like, what is happening? And then we scroll all the way back, and it turns out that a San Francisco company is releasing a game that is exactly our game, but they've replaced the shooting part with a slicing part. Which technically isn't even changing the mechanic. It's literally changing the method of input. Instead of tapping, you drag.
Yeah.
Your finger. Yeah. And they've changed the art style from being like sort of radical fishing was sort of pixely, ridiculous fishing was sort of factory, but we hadn't announced anything about ridiculous fishing yet. And they just had this trailer online, and they go like, well, we're releasing this original game. And we're like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. So the next day, the guy making the game gets in touch with us and goes like, yeah, I'm really sorry. I should have told you about this and all this and that. And we're like, well, dude, it's not a big deal, but just, please change the game to not be so much like our game and make your own thing, right?
Yeah.
We're people that we couldn't even copy a game, because we don't take pride in that. It's just, we want to make new, cool, original stuff that nobody has done before. We don't want to make that.
You don't want to make a clone. You want to make the original.
It's like, in the end at the end of making a game, like, the one thing you want to do is hear people talk about it and be proud of all the work you put in, right?
Yeah.
That's like the feedback of our fans, and just a general sense of accomplishment is what makes a lot of game making worth the long nights and long days that you work on each game. And then knowing when you release that you've basically stolen somebody else's idea and just slapped on a different art style, we could never do that. So we were like, just change your game a bit. Instead of making it about fishing, make it about, I don't know, digging into the earth and catching, I don't know, moles or beavers or whatever, whatever. And he was like, yeah, I can't do that, but I can offer you money. And we're like, it's not about the money. It's about that you're releasing a game. And if you release that game, people will think our game is a clone of your game. And he's like, yeah, so I can offer you credits in your game. And we're like, it's not about credits. It's about just please make a different game. Like, don't release this thing. So he goes, well, I can't do that. So we go, okay, so here's the deal. We release Ridiculous Fishing. We're going to work on it. Like, we're going to drop everything we're doing, and we're going to release Ridiculous Fishing in 2 months. You delay your game for 2 months, and we launch at the same time. And we don't get any answer on that. And the next day, his game has launched. And it has since been downloaded like over 1 million times and all that stuff. It's a pretty depressing story.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a dick move.
Yeah.
It was a super dick move. Like we try to be positive about everything, but this is just something that, it nearly burned us out for a few months, just knowing that, we spent all this time coming up with original novel stuff, right? Just games that seem like they could have been made in the 80s, because Super Crate Box, everybody goes like, well, it's Super Mario, like the original one, with guns and like a clever crate thing. And yeah, no, it is basically that, but that's not how we made it. We made it like, how do you make the ultimate platform shooter?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
At the end of that, we've worked so hard on making a platform shooter, and then somebody can just come in, take it, and earn a shit ton of money with our work, without even mentioning us, without even without even admitting that he did that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, if you're going to work on a game and you open your laptop and the first thing you think is somebody's gonna steal this and we're not gonna be able to support ourselves and get food, and I'll have to get a job at I don't care what supermarket soon. It's like not the good mindset to be creative in. Creativity for me, or at least for us, sort of requires peace of mind, so we can develop chaos in our mind that we can turn into video games.
Yeah. That's quite a. It's quite a nice way to look at developing your own game. Like, you want it to be your own thing instead of something that's just the same as someone else's. Like, it's a much more. Can't think of the right word. It's a much nicer way to look at it than it seems a lot of companies do nowadays.
Yeah, it's so I hear a lot of times, we're an indie studio, we're indies, and a lot of times people assume that indie is this pretentious bunch of hipsters with beards that are talking shit about AAA games, and they're trying to make something that is not a AAA game. And I think, like, 3 years ago, I wasn't an indie developer, and I sort of thought the same thing. And it's weird, because when you start getting to know people in the indie scene, you start to realize that they're not trying to to undercut the value of AAA games in any way. They don't even care about that. What they care about is they have something to tell. They want to make something, to create something. They've got this idea stuck in their mind that has been plaguing them for years, and they need to get it out. They need to develop it, or they've got this weird idea about, what if we make a game that is purely about an ambiguous story? So when people complete it, they've got no clue what they've played, but we present it as like this really straightforward thing. But whatever somebody plays, there's never a story that makes sense.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, that game is Dear Esther, which has been lauded as like a narrative, one of the best narrative games in recent history. And you just kind of go like, so wait, the goal behind that, one of the goals behind that was to present an ambiguous story. And they're like, yeah, no, we just really wanted to tell an ambiguous story. So the indie scene isn't really a bunch of people being pretentious. It's just a bunch of people wanting to make things that are their own. And the fun part about that is that wanting to do only your own thing and not caring about doing what anybody else is doing means that there is room for every game, because we're not competing. Like us and any other indie studio, we're not competing. We don't, because we're not making games for the same people. We're making games for people like us. You've got this cliche in the game industry, like, I make video games that I would like to play.
Yeah.
I think that's a terrible idea, to make games that you like to play. Because, me and JW once discussed this. if you make the game you want to play, you're the only one that's not gonna get out of the game what you want because you developed it.
Yeah, you know exactly what's going to happen and stuff.
Yeah, you know what's going to happen. You see every little mistake. You're the only one not getting the proper enjoyment out of it. So instead, we opt to at Vlambeer we opt to make the games we want to make, which is way easier because we can just enjoy the games we want to play when they're made by other people, and then enjoy making games that we then enjoy to share with people. Um, and the indie scene is just basically this bunch of people making stuff and helping each other out because there's no competitive edge to it, and that just makes it a different space from the AAA industry. There's always this thing like people going, indie games are better games and they're like the most important thing in gaming, and there's like other people that go like, well, but an indie game is just a pixelated platformer that doesn't have the production values of your Call of Duties. And it's like, but why can't we just have them both, right?
Yeah.
Nobody goes to cinema going like, well, I really want to see um, 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 what's the movie, The Avengers, and then look really weird when somebody after that goes to see Les Miserables or something.
Yeah.
It's That's not weird. They're two different types of movies, but you can play two different types of movies. While in gaming, we've got this huge, almost like sometimes it feels like a battlefield between AAA and indie, and it's such a shame because I know a lot of people from the AAA industry that I really like. I know I walked into Cliff Lusinski a while ago, and he's just the nicest dude. And it's like, why is there so much hate between the players? Certain aspects of the indie community are just really upset about about AAA games. It's a bit weird. Like, I would love to see games as a medium, as just something in which people can express stuff. And, one person trying to express how her hormone therapy went when she became a transgender, which is a game called Dysphoria. It's basically about this game developer that is a transgender, and she's trying to explain what she went through with hormone therapy. And it's this really weird experience playing it because she basically tells you this game is about me, and then she allows you to experience the way she felt during the therapy. And it's such a weird thing because at the end you sort of get it, right? You go like, oh wow, that must have been rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for me personally, like I never quite realized that, and now I feel for like a terrible person for never having quite realized how terrible, how difficult, and how brave it is for people to do that sort of stuff. Like, that game sort of opened my eyes that this is difficult for those people, and I think that is a really interesting, cool way to use video games.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But then I make arcade games that are about blowing shit up. That is just as valid a video game, and it's just as valid an expression of what I want to do and what I want to make and what I find interesting in video games. And I think it's such a shame that people try to say this game is worth more than this game. It's just somebody made it, right? Somebody put time and effort into making this video game, and it's basically a part of them. It's something that they worked on. It's something that they had faith in, or that they wanted to try or experiment or whatever. And it's amazing that people can do that. And it's an amazing time in which pretty much everyone could grab a program to make games and just start figuring out how to make games.
Yeah, yeah. We do live in an age where it is a lot easier to make games.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I saw this super interesting talk about the Internet of Things. It's a really cool talk about a guy who works in electronics. And he's just basically saying electronics are getting more and more accessible. And in a short while, like, everyone will be able to build their own alarm clock or digital map of the area with this one specific thing they need. Like they'll be able to tap into their supermarket's inventory and check whether there's bread available before they actually go to the supermarket. And they'll be able to make a machine that warns them if there is bread, and they'll be able to do that themselves. And it's like, that's what the world is going to. Everybody will be able to create everything for themselves. It's just that, for some things you will need more people or bigger things. But to make something small and personal and something that's for you, basically, or by you, everybody can do that.
Yeah.
It's cool. I mean, that's basically what indie is. It's just a bunch of people that decided that they wanted to make games, making games. And some of those are bad and some of those are great, but they're all games. And, there's always something in every single of those games. Well, not every single, like most of them.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I think it's a really exciting place to watch because AAA for me is interesting because it can do things that indie could never.
Yeah.
Right? A Dishonored or a Far Cry or an Assassin's Creed or a Mass Effect, that's just not something indie can do.
Yeah, that is true.
But then indies can do stuff that AAA can't do because, we don't have financial risks. The only risk that we have is not being able to eat good food, so we'll have to divert back to eating noodles all the time. I can tell you from experience that duck noodles are the best noodles. It's like the worst thing that can happen to us is we won't be able to pay rent and we'll have to find a job. Well, for Activision, it's like the worst thing is that can happen is we lose our 80 million investment and we have to fire the board of directors and get a new team and fire 300 people in the studio, which is, a bit.
It's
a bit
pretty big risk.
It's a bigger risk.
It's like the risk of kicking a stone on the street versus running into a burning building or something. It's like they are betting so much on every title that they just can't take risks.
Yeah.
You can't go, let's make this game about an ambiguous story, because there's like 90% chance that people just go like, what? If I'm paying $60, I want my story to be explained.
Yeah.
They can't do that because there's like 500 people on the line. And I get that, and I don't hate them for it, although that's a popular opinion, I think.
Yeah.
I don't hate AAA for doing the same thing with like really small changes over and over again. Because everyone want to play something novel, new, and interesting, I just play an indie game, and if I want something to go like, whoa, like this is overwhelming, I usually just play a AAA game, and they're both there.
Yeah. Personally, it really frustrates me if people, like when people decide to start some sort of massive fan war between AAA and indie, because it's like they're all games. If you enjoy one kind, don't scream and whine at the other kind.
Yeah, it's the internet. I've come to understand that recently. It's just, when we got cloned, there was this big flame war between people that said it was a bad thing and they were backing us and we could count on them, versus a whole lot of people going, "Oh, come on, you can just come up with another idea and don't whine. It's not like you own the idea." And it's like, what the hell? Like that's not like, if I were a friend of those people, they would never say something like that. But they're not my friends, right? There are people on the internet that feel that their opinion is a really important thing that I should know, that I should care about because it's their opinion.
Yeah.
And the only thing they end up doing is like potentially demotivating people that really need motivation to make games. But it's, people just like having an opinion, and the internet is like the ultimate place to have an opinion.
Yeah. People seem to think that because they're behind a monitor, then their words don't really have, or their words don't have any consequences, like what they say don't have consequences.
Yeah, or even worse, they think they have consequences, but they don't care because they just want to tell people what they think.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it amazing when you go on YouTube and you watch any music video? There's like always a bunch of people that goes like, "This is a bad song," and I go like, "Why are you spending time to tell people you don't know that you think this is a bad song?"
If it's a bad song, don't listen to it.
Yeah, it's like you are on the page for this song. You intentionally ended up on the page for this song, logged in to be able to post a comment, and then took the time to wrote this is a bad song, and then clicked OK.
Like, it's
Like,
what I find hilarious when people do that is they'll go into a video that they don't like, right? And if this video is partnered with YouTube or this video gets some form of ad revenue, they're actively giving money to someone they don't like to tell
Yeah.
people they don't like this person.
Yep.
It boggles my mind.
The internet is mind blowing, but it's a good place. I mean, in the end, it's like a bunch of people that are really making things harder on everyone. But in general, like I love the internet. It's what made Vlambeer possible. It's for us. It's a way to reach people that we could never reach, and it's a way to talk to people that we could never talk to. And like I said, 3 years ago, I knew nothing of the indie scene, and now I'm chatting with all these super interesting people that made amazing things or interesting things, and I'm just talking to them, learning stuff, discussing like what is a video game and where can we push video games, like what is interesting about video games, and I can talk to fans that are like, oh, I love this game, or people that want to get into video games and go like, what program should I use? And all these things I can do only because the internet exists. I'll happily take the trolls and the assholes with it.
Yeah.
Just sometimes I go like, come on, people, like look at an amazing dude like Phil Fish, who is really an amazing dude. Like every time I meet that guy, I go like, he's a bit blunt.
Yeah.
Like to say the least. He's blunt, but he's just being honest about everything. And
Yeah.
the internet just goes like he's an asshole, but he's not an asshole. He's the nicest dude ever. He's just really blunt.
Mhm.
But because they don't get to see that side of him, they just go like, well, he's an asshole, and this is my opinion, so I'm going to spread it. And for somebody working on a game for 6 years, basically a team of 2, 3, at best like 4 guys.
Mhm.
That is devastating. 5 years of your life being told you're an asshole.
It would be. It would be.
I mean, that's basically bullying. It's the definition of bullying is like.
It is. It is. See, but the thing about internet trolls and assholes is they're not actually the majority of people on the internet. They're just
the ones with the loudest voice.
Yeah, they're the very vocal minority that don't
Yep.
shut up.
But it's sad for a guy like Phil because he's like literally one of the nicest people I know.
It is. It is.
And just because he's so honest, which is something that people always want, right? You always see people going like, oh, this company is being dishonest. And then Phil, you can always count on whatever Phil says to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise he wouldn't be saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like people always say they want honesty, and when it's something they don't like, they assume it's just rudeness. But it's not.
And I guess that is sort of the same thing with indie games. I suppose that if you look at how angry people get at indie games, those are the same people that love Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
But that's an indie game they like, so they don't care. But if it's a game about that hormone therapy for transgenders, they go like, this is not a game. This is just a shitty Flash thing that somebody made in their spare time. And I'm like, yeah, no, it is a Flash thing that somebody made in their spare time. But it's not shitty.
It doesn't mean it's not a game either. It's like,
no, it's not, and it's a game, and it's an IGF nominated game, and it got nominated for the Independent Games Festival, which is pretty much the Oscars of the indie game industry.
It is.
So it's like, I guess the thing is that indie games are a bit different, right?
They're
They're
definitely
not.
appreciated.
They're a different thing from AAA games, and I guess like just as it was for me, it's just difficult to understand that something that looks like it could have been made by a 6-year-old can actually have more impact than a game made by 500 people over the span of 3 years.
It's two completely different things. It's like
Yeah. And
one is more emotional and the other one is more polished and shiny.
yeah, well, they can be either way because I mean I've played AAA games that really made me upset or cry or whatever. I've played indie games that did nothing to me, but I've also had it the other way around. It's just that there is so much in games, there is so much potential in our medium that it would be weird to go like this is not a video game.
Yeah.
Like let's please invite new things into our medium. Let's have games that don't use a screen. Let's have Joe and Sebastian Joust because that's one of my favorite games ever. It doesn't use a screen; it just uses 7 PlayStation Move controllers, and it's basically a game where you have to get each other to drop your PlayStation Move controller or to move it. So you're basically 7 people walking around preying on each other's Move controllers, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing game. It's like one of the most fun things I've ever played. And let's please have Proteus, which is a game about walking around on an island and you don't really know what you do, but it's beautiful and the music changes along with what you do, but you can't really use that to make the music you want. It's just like there is music and it's evolving with you, but you can't steer it. You don't really have control over the music.
Yeah.
And you go like, is this a game? And then you see the sunset and you go like, I don't care. This is beautiful.
Yeah. A game doesn't have to be expensive and fancy and polished to be a very like strong experience.
No, the thing I'm getting at is that we don't even know what a game is yet because we've never pushed those boundaries.
Yeah, you can't really classify a game.
We've not pushed far enough to say like this is where a video game ends. I've played a game by a guy called Robin Arnott. It's called Deep Sea. And what you do is you wear this blue gas mask on your face in real life. It gets completely dark, right?
Right.
You put on headphones, and you get this old school joystick in your hand that you can't see, and you can basically move left and right and shoot. So you hear a monster. You can't see anything. It's completely dark. You have this gas mask on your face. You hear this monster moving around, and you have to shoot it with your joystick, right? So you have to aim at it, like focus the sound so that it's center instead of left or right in the headset, and then shoot the monster, and then survive as long as you can before the monster gets to you. Now that isn't really impressive, but where it gets impressive is that the gas mask is really difficult to breathe in, right?
Yeah.
It has a tiny hole for oxygen,
Yeah.
and then the game measures whether you're inhaling or exhaling.
Yeah, I'm looking at
And when
a
you
photo.
inhale,
It looks difficult.
when you inhale, the game plays this sound, and the monster hears that, right? So it gets closer every time you inhale. And when you exhale, you hear like all the bubbles around your face. And the monster hears that too, but you can't hear the monster when you're exhaling. So you get this weird game where breathing in and breathing out are actually part of the game, which is not something that we've ever done before in games, which is not something that we've ever seen in games, but we're just pushing the boundaries over and over and over again. What is a game? What isn't a game? What are interesting ways of input? What are different ways of experiencing or seeing or basically experiencing a game? And it's all this interesting stuff is happening. And in the meanwhile, we can still enjoy our Hollywood AAA over-the-top shooter. It's like this is one of the most exciting times for video games, and I'm ridiculously happy to be making games at this point. It's like I wouldn't have wanted to make games in any other time.
Yeah. It's like that game you described there, it sounds both amazing and terrifying at the same time.
So I played this game at a conference at the Game Developers Conference, which takes place in San Francisco every year. And I had just given a talk to 3,000 people about a game that could die that we once made. And it's called the Experimental Gameplay Session. It's like a talk that happens every year, and they get 10 independent game developers or game developers to talk about something weird that they did.
Yeah.
And it was like the most terrifying talk I've ever given because it's 3,000, experts on video games. It's like everybody is there. If it's not just indie game developers. It's everyone from the guys you looked up at when you were 6. The heroes of the old times and the heroes of the current day and your indie game developer friends, and everybody's there and they're listening to you. And I have to talk about this game that doesn't exist anymore because it's dead. And it's like the one chance I will ever get to talk about this game to such an audience. So I'm super nervous. And I give that talk and it goes well and I'm really happy. And then the guy who made Deep Sea goes like, "Hey Rami, you should play this game." And I'm like, "Okay, I will play the game." And then that's like I thought I was terrified while giving the talk, but Deep Sea went over that by like 1,000,000%. It was like I knew I was sitting in the middle of a conference center, and I was still like this close to like screaming and passing out. It was like the most terrifying thing I've ever done within a video game.
Amazing experience.
It's amazing. I would recommend it to everybody who would not pass out at being terrified.
Okay.
I would not recommend it to people that will pass out when terrified.
So Dolby probably shouldn't play it then.
Ha ha ha! Very funny.
No, it's like sincerely the one of the scariest things I've ever done. It's so good. It's like that. That is why I love video games. That sort of shit.
Yeah. It sounds like one of them games that really pushes the boundaries.
One of the unique and inventive ones.
Yeah. It pushes the boundaries without seeming like it tries to.
It's just something. This guy, the guy who made it, is a game audio designer. So he does music and sounds. He's doing the audio for Antichamber, which is this other amazing game. Robin Arnott, and he just wanted to make a game about sound, and then he accidentally ended up making a game about sound and breathing. And it's pushing every boundary that you can think of. It's pushing the boundaries on input because breathing is a weird type of input. It's pushing the boundaries at output because only having audio is a weird sort of output. It's like if you would show this to a random person, they would argue about whether it's actually a game, but it's a game, and that's fun. Like it's just such a weird time with so many cool things happening that I'm really happy sitting here and making all these arcadey games that should have been made in the 1980s but haven't. But we're also trying to make this statement about responsibility in games, about having your player as like the most important thing in the game instead of having a character or world or an event in this fictional history. We just want to make games that are games. And that's like pushing in the other direction. We're not pushing against experience, we're pushing against gameplay and trying to get more out of it than we could before. And just pushing over and over and over again. And in a way, everybody in games is trying to push against these boundaries. It's not only the indies, also the AAAs. Because look at something like Dishonored, look at something like Far Cry. Those games couldn't exist 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And not only because they're graphically impressive, but also because the world wasn't ready for them 5 years ago.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So that's exciting. I don't know. It's cool.
We're definitely in a big transitional period in the world of gaming.
Yep. And it's nice because you also see all these consoles popping up. We've got super good guys with Sony, and Well, so this is actually sort of a scoop. We're actually talking about them about our upcoming game, Luftrausers, and we love these guys at Sony. They're like super great people. But you also see like the console branch is changing a bit because suddenly you've got like this small console, the Ouya, at like $100 that indie people can develop for, and I've got no clue whether it's going to work. But the fact that somebody is taking on Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo in a space that is basically Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo,
Yeah.
that's different.
Yeah.
It's weird. I've got no clue what is going to happen, but it's just the fact that somebody tries to do that is telling about how much is changing.
Yeah, I really hope that the Ouya does well, right? Because it was funded on Kickstarter, and they wanted something like 950,000, right? And they ended up making more than $8 million for it. So obviously people want it. So I sincerely hope that it does well because it's something that I've kept an eye on for a while, and it looks amazing. Honestly.
Yeah, I've got one standing right next to me here, and it's nice. I have to say, everything they promise in their Kickstarter, it's just true. It's a small thing. It works pretty much out of the box. You hook up your HDMI, you hook up your controllers wirelessly, and you start making games. And in the case of anybody buying the Ouya, you start downloading games and play them. It's like literally that. It's easy to develop for. It's nice to set up. It just like the controller is actually really good, which I was extremely worried about because we never really saw anything of that.
Yeah.
But the controller is actually just good. Like the analog sticks, the version we got is like a prototype version, so the analog sticks in our version need a bit of work. But they're working on that, and for the final release, I have faith that the hardware will be good. I'm just really like the thing that the Ouya is depending on right now is like A, how many developers can they get aboard for games, and B, how many people will be there to buy those games.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 8 million sounds like a lot of people, but it's basically 60,000 Ouyas, I think.
Yeah. I think. I'll just go into its Kickstarter and actually check and see how much backers it has.
Sure.
It has 63,416 backers.
Yeah, so 60,000 backers. So that is 60,000 people. Now, assuming we put a super crate box on there, that means assuming we make it $1, that the maximum amount of money that we're going to get is like 60,000, and that's like if we get everybody to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one.
And we still need to eat and drink. We still need to pay our rent. We still need to pay our, mortgage and everything. We don't really have mortgage yet, but I'm thinking of buying a place.
Yeah.
So we're just normal people that also need to eat and drink and pay for our rent and everything.
Yeah.
So we need money, and now we're two guys, so basically that's like a few $1,000s in the month for the office and everything. But if we have to spend 3 months developing, that's like that's a good amount of money, right? That's a good chunk of money.
Yeah.
So definitely is.
Then we need to make sure that we at least earn that amount of money, or that we have enough money to throw away money.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, like I said, we're an indie game developer. We can't just throw away money because money is like what gives us time to do weird shit.
It definitely is. It definitely is. But yeah, you mentioned earlier about your game Luftrausers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
So Luftrausers, a year and a half ago, we had a friend over, a musician, and we decided to make a game in 2 days and then sell it to some sort of Flash website. One of those websites you play that instead of doing your IT homework at school.
Yeah.
Those games.
Yeah.
And we were like, we'll just make a game and we'll sell it to those people and then we'll be done with it. And that game was basically a 2D dogfighting game, as in not dogs fighting, but as in airplanes.
Yeah.
We get that question a lot. I don't know. Although a dogfighting game would probably sound Vlambeerish, it's like not really. But we made this dogfighting game and we couldn't manage to sell it, which was weird. But it's like it has a really striking art style. It uses only a few colors. It's a bit brown. But it's this really when we were done with it and we couldn't manage to sell it, there was something in that game, the way the airplanes control and feel and fly, that just made us go like, we should do something with this because this could be way better than just a simple Flash game made in 2 days. So we decided to go back to the project and make a proper game out of it, and that is Luftrausers. And Luftrausers is a dogfighting game that is all about flying the best airplane in the world, shooting and destroying as many airplanes and fighter jets and boats and battleships and submarines and everything that you can before taking on like the really, really big enemies. And like Super Crate Box, it's a high score game, although this time there's a lot more to unlock and a bit of a campaign arc to it, even though it's not really a campaign. It's just that you get better at the game, so you see more stuff, you encounter more enemies, and more stuff happens. So there's actually sort of
a progression.
Yeah, a weird sort of progression to it. And we've been working on that for the past 6 months. It's somewhat more by now. It's probably like the past 7 months or so. And it's almost done. We're really happy with how it turned out. I think Matthew played it when I ran into him at Eurogamer.
Yeah, it was amazing game. It was probably one of my favorite games at the convention there.
Thanks so much. It's simple. It's typically Vlambeer. It's one of those games that just does what it does really, really well. And we took so much time to make sure that it does what it does really well. You can build your own airplane. There's 125 different airplanes you can build, and each of them flies completely different. It's like each of them is a completely different game to play. So one of the cool things I think that we did was we made sure that every airplane has its own soundtrack. Well, so it doesn't only play different, it also sounds different.
Yeah.
And it's super overwhelming. You're just flying, you're dodging right between 20 bullets, and then you dive, you get right above the water. There's water splashing up everywhere, and you just barely manage to avoid the anti-aircraft guns on the big boat before you shoot it. And it sinks. And it's like that sort of feeling, like, and over and over and over and over again until finally you don't manage to dodge properly and you die and you start over, but you've unlocked one other thing that you can try.
It definitely sounds like a sort of game I'd enjoy.
So the funny thing is, I just said that we try to make games that we like to make, not try to make games that we like to play, but with Vlambeer, it has sort of turned out that most of the games that we made, I still really enjoy. And I think Luftrausers might be the one that I enjoy playing most, because there's so much stuff to do, even though it's just, you're flying the airplane and shooting stuff, but flying the airplane with an airplane that is really slow because it has thick armor and it fires homing missiles and it has an engine that allows you to float instead of fall. It's such a different game from playing with an airplane that has a super booster engine, which makes you go really fast. And it has a melee body, so you can fly through things without getting damaged. And it fires a cannon, which is the slowest weapon in the game, but it destroys everything.
Sounds awesome.
They're completely different games, but they're both a lot of fun.
It sounds like an awesome game to play, and I wish I was at Eurogamer last year to try it out.
We will probably be showing it at a few more events, although I don't think we'll be in the UK before it launches. The
UK's tend to start their conventions like July.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're showing it at the Penny Arcade Expo in Boston. We'll be showing it at a few events in Europe as well. So it'll be around, and hopefully we can release it before the end of next month. It's just it's basically done now, but we just want to do some final testing and make sure everything works perfectly. That's the way things go with video games, I suppose. We intentionally tried to release it last year. When I met Matthew, it actually had like this giant poster saying like releasing, I think it was November.
Yeah.
That it said. Releasing November 2012. And, we just rather make the game as good as we can and release it a bit later than just go like, yeah, it's November, we're done.
Yeah, so your thinking is you'd rather have a perfect game in February than an okay game in November.
Yeah, obviously. It's like I said, we're not making this game because we desperately want to have advertisements in bus stops and earn millions of dollars. We just want to be proud of whatever the fuck we made at the end.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a significantly more. I'm glad that you try to make games like that, because it seems like a lot of games nowadays, especially with the AAA games, they seem a lot more rushed than you're obviously making with Luftrausers. Seems like AAA ones are trying to push their games out on time instead of push their games out well.
Because it's a massive risk to them, right? Yeah. To us, we have responsibility to one group of people, or two groups of people, ourselves and our fans. That's the people that we have a responsibility to. We don't want to disappoint the fans, and we don't want to disappoint us. Now, for a AAA industry game, there are so many things going on at once. Like, there's a marketing machine that is pumping in. For Halo, I think the game development budget was similar to the marketing budget. And, that has to go to the beat. It has to go like every so many days we have something newsworthy, we have something for the fans, we have something for this, to just make sure as many people know about the game, because they need to earn millions and millions of dollars.
They do.
So they can't just go like, well, the marketing has been going really well, but we're going to delay it by 2 months.
Yeah.
Like, unless it is absolutely terrible, they can't do that.
Yeah, it's a real shame, because
but it's the way things go, right? Because like, look at the internet. If some AAA game decided today to go like, yeah, so the game is delayed by 2 months,
then the internet would explode.
The internet would explode, and there would be like 10% of people would just go like, I don't want to buy this game anymore. I'm just going to download it when it's done.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly their own choice if they want to do that. But, from a company point of view, that's a pretty big deal. 10% of sales on a game like that.
It is.
So they just don't miss the beat.
Yeah.
And if we finish a game, we upload it to the internet, and it's out there. If they finish a game, they have to send it to Microsoft and Sony, and those have to look at it, and they have to confirm it's good, and they have to make sure that in a PlayStation game it says like X button, and in a Microsoft game it says like A key or something. Like everything has to fit perfectly, and there's like tiny weird little rules that you have to keep to if you want to release. And if you miss one of those things, you just get your game back and you have to submit it again. And it costs you a bit of money, a fair bit of money.
Yeah.
So there's this weird thing where they have to submit their game a few months before release, because it has to be certified. It has to be printed to CDs. The CDs have to be made. It has to be distributed to all these shops. It's a pretty big undertaking that they need to go through. But we, as an indie, we have the luxury of just going like, well, do you think it will upset the fans a lot if we say this is going to be 2 months later? And we just go like, well, no, our fans like high quality, polished games that are what we wanted to make. So they'll be okay with it. We hope.
Yeah.
And then we bring that news to people, and they go like, well, yeah, no, okay. If you say it will be a better game.
Yeah, if it's going to be a better game, then push it back a couple of months. Rather than bring it out the day you said you're going to bring it out and have it be less than it could be.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're working on this because we want to make this game. We want to make this game not because we want to make a mediocre version of this game, but because we want to make the best version of this game ever.
Yeah.
But people, after the ninja fishing thing, after the time we got cloned, basically, people kept asking us, like, aren't you worried about Super Crate Box clones? And we were like, we're not worried about Super Crate Box clones because we really believe that Super Crate Box is the best Super Crate Box like that can exist.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of Super Crate Box clones that certain types of people enjoy more than our own original game, but we still think if you look at, like, a Super Crate Box like, which is a genre apparently, if you look at Super Crate Box likes, like, for us, Super Crate Box is the best one amongst there.
Yeah.
It's the most pure vision of that sort of game that has been made today. And we're really proud of that. And we want to feel that way about Luftrausers too, when, without a doubt, the Luftrauser clones are gonna roll in. It's been a joke a bit that it's not even news anymore when a Vlambeer game gets cloned, and it's sort of true.
I certainly, of the games of yours that I've played, I have to confess I've only played like 2 of the games you've made. I've played Radical Fishing.
Yeah.
I played that like 2 years ago on a website, and it was surprisingly fun. I didn't think it'd be as fun as it was, but it was really fun. And like I said earlier, I was playing Super Crate Box. And personally, I think you've done incredibly well with those games. Like, I've never played a clone of them because I really enjoy them personally.
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's the way we want people to feel. We just want them to feel that if they play the clone, they go like, yeah, this is like the other game, but the other game was better.
Yeah.
But that is why Ninja Fishing, why the other clone hurts, because Radical Fishing, that was just the first game we made, right? It's good, but it's not the best that we could do, because that is Ridiculous Fishing. That's the iOS version we're launching like in probably like 2 months or so.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that. When I had a shot of that was great.
Yeah, you played Ridiculous Fishing too. Yeah, that was a super sneak peek. That was sort of cool. It's the first time we showed Ridiculous Fishing in a long time because, like I said, after the cloning thing, we were demotivated, and the only thing that you really need as game developers is motivation to keep going, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a typical game development circle, I don't know if you've ever talked about that, but it goes like, you have an idea. So for Radical Fishing, let's just say the idea was we were watching a documentary on tuna fishing, and there was this beautiful shot of a fish being slung up into the air from the water in front of the sunset. You know, it's like the most cliche shot you can think of in a fishing documentary. It's like the fish is floating in front of the sun, and there's like a guy with a rod standing there and just slinging the fish up into the air, and we just go like that plus duck hunt.
Yeah.
And basically, that's what Radical Fishing is. And you start coding right away because it's like, oh my god, this is an amazing idea. This should exist. How are we going to make this? So you start programming and you start going and you draw like some really simple fish-like thingies, you know, in Paint or whatever, and you go like, oh wow, this is working. This is gonna be great. And then you go like 2 weeks later, you're like, God, this is fun. And then after 4 weeks, you go like, God, this is work. And then after 6 weeks, you go like, oh shit, we still need to finish that game.
Yeah.
And then after 8 weeks, you go like, okay, let's draw another fish. Let's figure out something else. And then like at that point, it's work, right? You're no longer coming up with fun ideas. You're just implementing the old ideas that you had. You're making sure they're as good as possible. And you're just going to work every day thinking like, okay, this I need to fix, 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 this is wrong, this doesn't feel right, and I should test whether this and this works.
Yeah.
And while doing that, while fixing things and while implementing old ideas, you run into all these other problems, new bugs, you fix one bug, you introduce 3 others. So this to-do list that you have instead of growing shorter, it gets longer and longer and longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
Until at one point, that's where it starts shrinking. And that's where it starts getting interesting again, because then you're starting to finish. You're starting to get to the point where the game is good. You've got no more things to add to the to-do list. It's like you're right. You're getting there, right?
Yeah, it's like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're almost at it.
And that's also a really rough time because, you've still got these things in your mind like, oh, wouldn't it have been awesome if at the start we did this instead of that? Couldn't we go back? And you have to sort of tell yourself like, no, that's not the game you're making because otherwise you wouldn't have come this far. The game you're making is this.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to push yourself through until at some point your to-do list is like 6 or 7 or 8 or like a few small things depending on the skill of your game where you just go like, yeah, so if I fix these, or if I change something here, that would like have repercussions through the whole game. So it's better to leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Like in radical fishing, it's like at the end of when you're done with development, changing the speed at which your hook descends into the water. Like if you change that value, you have to change the speeds of every fish to feel right again. You have to go back and make sure the camera allows enough space to see ahead of you. Like everything sort of collapses on itself if you change that one variable. So releasing a game is sort of saying like, and this is where the game is good. Like this is it. It's. I know there's like a few things left on the list, but this is it. If we go beyond this, it's not going to be a better game. It's just going to take more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like release. That's where you go like, okay, it's done. How are we going to make sure that people know about it? How are we going to make sure that people will be able to play it? At that point, you probably send a few people a copy of the game so you can get a bit of a feel for what they think or what they feel.
Yeah.
At that point, it's just releasing, and that's the other exciting part where you've released it, and then suddenly the tweets and the Facebook messages and the press and everybody's talking about your game, and you're like, okay, that's cool. This guy likes it. Oh, this guy doesn't like it. That's a shame. Why doesn't he like it? And you just sort of take all that along, and it sort of recharges your battery for the next game.
Yeah.
But that motivation that you need to push through that middle part with ridiculous fishing, that was just sort of gone after the cloning thing.
Yeah, that's one of the sad things about.
Yeah, we honestly thought about giving up a few times. Like we were sitting in a bar at the end of a long day, and it was just like I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
Why are we even doing this? Yeah. And then we just kind of went like, it's like the fans and the press that pulled us through because there was such an overwhelming support from like everywhere. Like Edge wrote this guy called Chris Donlan who wrote for Edge. He wrote this amazing piece on Edge, saying something like, the only thing that these cloners are gonna get is customers, not fans. Because to have fans, you have to be authentic, you have to be original. And we were like, well, hell yeah, that's, they might have gotten customers that otherwise we would have gotten, but they will never have that sort of thing that we have, where if we're down, we can just go to Twitter and tweet that we're down and have like people go like, well, dudes, we got your back, we loved your game, and get an email from somebody at school who spent their mock class drawing a Super Crate box instead of paying attention to class, which we can't recommend that.
You don't recommend it, but it's nice when it happens.
But it's good. It's cool when it happens.
Yeah.
Like
you certainly do original very well.
Yeah, we try. It's what makes it fun for us. We try to push boundaries because, like I said, I think I've been talking about that for half an hour at least. It's like pushing the boundaries of stuff is what makes making games exciting. It's not pushing. It's not doing the same thing again that makes it. I couldn't work at a Bejeweled company just making another Bejeweled. Yeah. But I'd love to take a look at the puzzle genre, at that sort of game, and just see what happens. Because I don't like those games. I really don't like playing them.
I'm
Like,
not
I can
a
see how people would like them, but I don't like them. So what would a game like that look like if I made it?
Yeah.
I actually organized a game jam. You know what a game jam is?
Like a fuck this jam sort of thing?
Yeah. So game jams are basically like really short contests of making games. So developers get together, and then there's like the organization of the jam announces the theme, and the theme is usually something abstract like infinity or conflict or extinction or anything. And then you get this really limited amount of time to make a game. You can team up, you can work alone, whatever you want, but usually it's like 2 days up to a week. And a while back, I organized a game jam, an international game jam over the internet that was called Fuck This Jam. And the idea of Fuck This Jam was to challenge developers. The theme was make a game in a genre you hate.
Okay.
And the only reason for that was to get games in genres by people that know nothing about the genre. Because you don't hate, like, hating a genre is a pretty strong thing, right?
Yeah.
It's somewhere between just being ignorant about what makes the genre fun and just don't caring about what makes the genre fun.
Yeah.
So what would a game look like if you got somebody who doesn't know and doesn't care about the genre to make a game in the genre? Like, what would happen? And there were like dozens of super interesting games made in a week. Vlambeer has been involved in organizing a few of such jams. We've also organized. JW was what like the main organizer of another game jam called 7-Day FPS, and that was basically, well, guess it was like a game jam to make a first-person shooter in 7 days.
Yeah.
But then the fun thing is, like, you kind of think like first-person shooters have done everything there is by now.
Yeah.
But then these guys, Wallfire Games, they sit down and they make this game in which your gun behaves like an actual gun. So you have to reload it by hand. You have to make sure the safety is off. You have to, you have to do everything you'd have to do with a real gun. And you can screw up every of those steps. You can fuck up reloading and, your gun will jam, or the bullet won't go in. And it's really weird because suddenly, you have this scene from every movie where the guy is sitting behind cover or running towards cover, and he's sitting behind cover and he has to rapidly reload his gun and then shoot the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
Like in every action movie has that moment where the good guy is sitting there and there's like dust and sparks everywhere, and he's just sitting behind cover, like reloading his gun, and then he gets up and in slow motion he shoots 3 of them and he walks off.
Yeah.
And that moment has never been in the game. Until that game was made, because suddenly you were there, you ran towards cover, and you had no more bullets, and you had to reload perfectly. And not like in Gears of War, like press the button at the right time, but you had to actually reload yourself. You had to get the clip out of the gun, you had to fill it with bullets, you had to click it back in, and then make sure the safety was off, and then shoot.
Well, it certainly sounds very interesting.
It's like, is it fun? I don't know. But is it interesting? Yeah, no, sure. Like, I've never seen that before in a game, and a game jam can trigger that sort of idea and get people to think about things they take for granted.
Yeah.
And some of those ideas you'll see in some of those ideas from Fuck This Jam and some of those ideas from 7-Day FPS, you'll probably see them reflected in the future in AAA games.
I certainly hope I do.
They will, because that's the thing. Everybody is playing games. Every game developer is playing games. Every game developer sees these changes. AAA game developers see the changes in the indie scene. They know that things are changing. They know that just offering a roller coaster ride is good for a whole lot of people, but there's this whole group of people that just want something else.
Yeah.
And
the people who want something more, the people who need that sort of itch scratched.
And they're getting there, right? Look at like Far Cry. I never really liked the Far Cry games, but this Far Cry 3 game actually, it did interesting things.
Yeah.
I gotta agree there. I didn't like Far Cry 2 either. It was, in my opinion, was a pretty terrible game. But I've got Far Cry 3 sitting over there, and I'm enjoying playing it.
Yeah, no, like they've got this really interesting antagonist and this really weird theme of sort of devolving into a power fantasy of being a really powerful warrior. And you can't quite tell what's real and what's inside the head of this guy, and it's just it gets really weird and really interesting. And it's something that if you go back like 5 years, a first person shooter was a first person shooter was a first person shooter.
Yeah.
And now it's just Far Cry 3 is a first person shooter dealing with insanity as like the main theme. And it's a free roaming game in which you run around an island while following this sort of story that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they didn't have limping scenes, which was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for about an hour and 40 minutes now, so I should probably close it up.
Yep.
It's been great having you on, Rami. Love to.
It was a lot of fun.
I've been BrokenBriken. This has been Two Guys, Two Guests. Dolby, say goodbye.
Goodbye, and have a good one.
Bye, guys. See you again in 2 weeks.
See you again.